This is a beautiful New York morning, and of course I'm a softie, so I will just quietly stand up when the talk is over. So, we will have a very interesting set of talks this morning, and we start with how to deal with foundations.
Thank you, Zabi.
A great expert. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Zabi. So thanks everybody, particularly to Zabi and Mark for inviting me to talk here today. I'm going to talk about, basically, I'm going to provide a very broad overview of the foundation and corporate world from the point of view of somebody who's spent the last 20 years raising money from these entities. As it's clear from yesterday's talk, there's a lot of interest in the private space sector in raising funds to do science privately, and not without, depending on federal funding. So we'll go to the first slide. I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I'm a scientist. I was trained as a molecular biologist through to the faculty position level. And then about 20 years ago, I made a career change into fundraising. And since I have grant writing experience from my faculty career, it seemed the best place to start out was corporate and foundation work. And so that is what I have done for the last 20 years. My most recent position was at Caltech, where for 8 years I ran the Office of Corporate and Foundation Relations, and then the Office of Foundation Relations only when it was split off. And so when I was there, I was the officially designated Keck and Moore liaisons. So I was the point of contact between Caltech and the WM Keck and the Gordon and Betty Moore Foundations. I've worked with a very large gift range, anything from $5,000 to $300 million, which was the Caltech commitment. In 2001, Gordon Moore made Caltech a gift of $600 million. This was and remains the biggest gift in the history of higher education. $300 million of that went into Caltech's endowment, and the other $300 million basically was managed on a day-to-day basis through my office. So as director, 40% of my job was just managing that gift. About 3 years ago, I launched my own consultancy, and I consult to universities, research institutes, and a variety of non-profits in the area of raising funds from corporations and foundations. Broadly, there are at least 140,000 foundations in the US, in the Foundation Directory online database, and this is growing. More and more foundations are being set up in Europe and across the globe since their tax laws are evolving to favor this kind of philanthropy. The bulk of, sadly actually, 65% of all foundation money in this country goes to religious causes. Of the rest, the bulk of the science funding goes into the biomedical area. One thing to remember about foundations is they have nothing in common with each other, and there's no reason that they should. As a friend of mine says, when you know one foundation, you know one foundation. So they're all different, and many of them were set up by individuals who, for example, might have had a child with type 1 diabetes, and so then they're interested in identifying a cure for type 1. So a large number of them fund biomedical research. There are not as many that fund the physical sciences, but there are some very prominent funders in this area, and this would be typically where you might start in the private space area. In a general way, foundations play a similar role to venture capital. They support early stage research, innovation, cutting edge. They're willing to take more risk than a federal agency. In biology, many provide young investigator awards for newly hired faculty. They support a wide variety of programs, both globally and in the US. And their existence is defined by the 501c3 regulation. A long time ago, the American government was very, very enlightened, and they stated that charity is not taxable. Therefore, if you set up a charitable organization, you are tax exempt according to 501c3 rules. The limitation is you then have to give money to another 501c3. So what you have is a loop with a 501c3 institution at either end, a foundation or a university or 501c3 designated recipient. That's what you have to remember with foundations. So they're not for profits, and they give to non-profits. They do not give to for-profits. So Microsoft cannot go to a foundation and get money. There are some differences between the way foundations and corporate donors work. Corporations, up until about 25 years ago, used to do a lot of philanthropy. At Caltech, we had a number of endowed chairs that were given by corporations. That era is over. They do give, but they tend to be very bottom line focused. So many, for example, support workplace pipelines, STEM education, the companies that are in the technical area are very interested in recruiting people with a good education in that area. So they address the bottom line. Foundations have a vast variety of charters. They can be anything that the original donor was interested in. So they are much more specific mission focused. Their timelines are also very different. If you're looking to raise funds, if you want fast money, you really are better off going to a corporation. They can move faster, they're a little more nimble, they typically will have several pots of money they can draw from. The scope of their giving is broader, but they usually give smaller amounts. Foundations can give very big gifts, and they can be larger, but they're often slower. And to work effectively with a foundation, you really need to keep a 1 year to 18-month timeline in mind. You can't really go to a foundation and say, I need money for this program. It's taking place. We're holding a conference in 3 months. That's not going to work. And they have a specific mission, and what you need to do needs to fit into that mission. What I do is everything that is part of the activity of working with these entities. So I do all the donor cultivation. I can assist with writing letters of intent. I'm familiar with the RFPs that are issued by those foundations that issue them. I can provide customized database searches. I can help you develop a strategy for a foundation program. I build and run programs for my clients, and I can advise on stewardship of foundation relationships. Since I have been working as a consultant with a lot of entities that don't have foundation programs, my most significant recent success was we brought in $1 million from the Keck Foundation for Clarkson University. So that was at Christmas, and that was their first Keck Foundation grant. It took about 1.5 years to get them to the point of being able to submit a successful proposal, and it has boosted them into another level, so they're now playing with a completely different set of universities. So it was very, very important for them. What I'm currently doing, and this is the case study item here, I am working with the Boldly Go Institute to design for them a foundation program focusing on potential private funders for private space science. And we've just started identifying and beginning to cultivate some of the major foundations that fund in the physical sciences, including Keck, Moore, and a number of others. So this is just beginning. This is a very fast presentation. Some considerations. Some things to think about when you are planning to work with a foundation. What I'm noticing more and more with the non-profits I work with is there's a chicken and egg question. If you want to apply for money, it costs money. For example, one of my clients, it turns out, has never requested audited financial statements. Some foundations don't require them, but the real major funders do. It can be quite expensive to get an audit, but if you want to go to the Keck Foundation, you do have to be able to demonstrate that your activities are on a sound financial footing, that you're using your funds well, that you're attaining your goals. And that's how they evaluate non-profits. It's one of the tools that a foundation might use to evaluate your proposal. So getting an audited financial statement together is a non-trivial expense, but it's something that we identified that this particular client needs to do. Universities usually just routinely produce these. They have strong finance offices, development offices, and this type of supporting document is always available, but it isn't necessarily for everybody. A non-profit does need to consider that there are some administrative costs that go with working with foundations. Audits are one of them. You may need to do PR in the sense of having a brochure or an annual report that showcases what you do. a foundation might request such a thing as an attachment to a proposal. Consultants too, if you want a consultant, then one misapprehension that I do occasionally encounter is people will say to me when I tell them how much I charge, well, we'll pay you when the grant is funded. This doesn't really work for this particular reason. We'll skip the next point and we'll talk about funding rate. A mature foundation office, such as at a university, for example, at Caltech, a good one will have a 30% funding rate, and this is an office that's often been running 5 or 10 years. What that means is, for every grant that is funded, 3 were submitted. Caltech had a 50% funding rate, which is, in my experience, the highest I've ever seen. So when I was running it, for every 2 grants submitted, we got 1 funded. That is unusually high, and it's entirely due to their brand. So when I charge up front, it's because, well, you know, I also have overhead, and I can't necessarily wait until you've submitted 3 grants to be paid. So that's one issue. Another issue is foundations may not fund overhead. A lot of them don't, or they'll fund to about 10%. This is very different from a federal award, where typically their overhead funding rates are 50% or higher. I think Caltech's negotiated rate was 54%. So if you get $1 million from the DOE, 54% of that goes to overhead. Foundations on average fund 10%. Many of them do not fund any indirect costs. So you have to think about where those costs are coming from. The reason they don't do that is they want all their funding to go to the program. They don't want to fund the lights or somebody's research assistant 3 offices away. The other thing to bear in mind right now with the foundation world is it's highly competitive. Since federal rates have been flat, particularly in biomedical research, the foundations are getting swamped with foundations. Everyone's thinking, well, you know, NIH didn't fund me, I'll send it to a foundation. So they have many more times the number of proposals they're looking at. They're very competitive. What you're submitting has to be very, very good. Many of the things that should have gone to NIH are not suitable for funding at foundations. So you can't just assume that they'll fund incremental research. They fund innovation. So you need some kind of infrastructure for working effectively with foundations. Proposals are a little different from federal proposals. They often are shorter, easier to write, but they have their own requirements, which are very different. I always like to say they're like turning a federal proposal around 180 degrees. You can stick your message up front, then they want to know how you're going to do it, and then how that fits with their mission. So that's a good format to go with. And of course, you have to remember the 501c3 underpinnings of the whole foundation world. Overall, I think working with space programs, private space, and the types of things that we've been discussing the last couple of days, these are very, very new. It's very new for foundations. Mostly they will ask you, well, why aren't you going to NASA? The relationship of the space programs with the foundation community is the way it seems to me where biomedical research was 20 years ago. The paradigm is still evolving. One thing that's of interest to me is how do we work between the prize awarding organizations and broad project funding? So there's some areas here where I think there should be more communication, more conversation. I think there's still a need to educate these funders about space. Why not NASA? And to make the case better than has been done to the community as a whole. And explain to them how their funding can make a difference. A big foundation grant is $50,000. When you have a project total cost of $30 million, people will say, well, how can my funding make a difference? This is something that really has not been addressed, and I think more work needs to be done there in communicating what we do. So I think what's attractive to me is this is a new area where we can really make a difference for space, but it's still at a very, very early stage and it's evolving, and it's hard for me to predict where it will go. So that's my presentation, and if you have questions, I welcome them. Yes.
Can a 501c3 give funds to a 501c4?
I have never heard that it could. I don't know. I think you would have to check with a foundational attorney, and they're available and can answer that question. In fact, we have one. Yes?
So we've seen a number of 501c3s moving to become public benefit corporations. Do you know what's behind that drive?
I don't. I work primarily with foundations, and I don't know why they would do that. I know the Pew Charitable Trust has transformed from a typical foundation that made grants to an entity that runs its own programs, so it doesn't really make grants anymore. Sometimes that is driven by perceiving that just handing money out is not effective, maybe. That's the closest analog I know to that.
So when you are thinking with foundations, yeah, so can you actually create programs instead of relying on existing programs? So can you cultivate relationships on a way that foundations who are not interested in space will become interested in space?
Yes, you can actually. It takes time, but if you have a very good relationship with a particular funder, they may do something like that. Sometimes they'll give outside their own guidelines, although that's not common if they like you. There's a foundation in Chicago that funded Kip Thorne because they just love Kip Thorne. Other than that, they only fund in Illinois. But the executive director of the foundation made a decision because he can. I know a couple of instances where new programs evolve through conversations between scientists and foundations. So with the space issues, I had a conversation with the Keck Foundation. Funding space per se is not really in their plans right now, but the program officer said, well, it might become so in the future, because they're always looking for new opportunities, new innovative areas, cutting edge work. So yes, so I think it's always good for scientists to stay in touch with foundations, to talk to the ones that you know and keep them in the loop, even if they can't fund you now.
So if you never try, you will never know is a good principle.
Correct. If you don't ask, you don't get. And a lot of what I do is just asking people. Yes, there's a gentleman at the top.
Is there a sector that you specialize in, for instance, biomedical education?
My experience is primarily biomedical, but when I was at Caltech, I was responsible for the whole campus, so I did everything. We did engineering, geology, aeronautics, everything.
On that note, did you find one area gets funded quicker than the other, like a sector is easier to fund than other sectors?
Well, biomedical. Engineering at Caltech got a lot of money, and physics, math, and astronomy got a lot of money. GPS got the least, and humanities was somewhere in the middle. Yes, there's a...
What's the best way to get to know the people in the foundation? When we were applying for the MacArthur grant, they said that you may not meet with anyone at the MacArthur grant.
It depends on the foundation.
Unethical or...
Some of them have firewalls, or they have bottlenecks where you really cannot talk to a person. In that case, you just have to send in an application and hope. Other foundations like Keck, for example, very transparent. They would far rather you talk to them before submitting proposals. A lot of them will say in FDO, no unsolicited proposals. What that means is don't submit something without talking to the program officer first. When they pre-select, what that means is they choose who they're going to fund. Those are the ones that are challenging to get a foot in the door of, because they decide who they're going to fund. They don't issue RFPs, and they don't often have a mailing address even. Right. So again, you have to suck it and see. It never hurts to pick up a phone and ask, and they'll tell you if they accept conversation or meetings, or if they just do RFPs. Some do both.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.